Hi, my name is Randy Reed. I'm the publisher and editor of the Edison Report, a sponsor of the National Lighting Bureau's annual Lighting Forum. We're here at the studios of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, where I'm serving as the moderator of 5 panel discussions. This panel is titled Designing with Tunable White Light. The panelists include Terry Clark of Finelite, Dr. Brent Protzman of Lutron, and Sandra Stashik of Acuity Brands. Welcome. And Terry, let me start with you. For our audience, first of all, define tunable white light and define circadian stimulus.
Thank you, Randy. So first of all, tunable white light really breaks into 3 important but different segments. One segment we call dim to warm, and this is where as a user turns a dimming switch down, the light not only decreases intensity, but it shifts from a white color to a warmer color. We're actually sort of duplicating what happens in an incandescent or halogen lamp as it dims. And it's very important for hospitality, very important for your home, because we love that buttery, warm yellow color as the lights dim. The second is 2-color white, and that's an emerging, very big marketplace. And this is where you have 2 different LED chips, one a cool white, one a warm white, and you proportionally power between the 2 of them. And your user interface is you set intensity, but you also set color. And you can do that locally, or you can do it through a central source. The third is precision lighting, museum lighting, where you change the whole gamut. You can change the color, you can go way off the black body curve, the gamut, and that takes 3, 4, 5, sometimes 7 LEDs, and you're actually manipulating them. So why do you do this? One is for visual preference, but the other is the human eye, in a circadian sense, is taking those photons, it goes through photoreceptors in the eye and into the hormonal part of the brain. And you're actually addressing melatonin. There may actually be 5 different photoreceptors, and so you're actually impacting the balance of hormones in the body. And you're doing both at the same time. You're lighting for preference, and you're stimulating the hormones.
Sandra, with Acuity, are you beginning to see sales of tunable white? And if so, what sort of projects are people using tunable white?
Thanks, Randy. Certainly we are seeing sales of tunable white, and I think the first area that we saw it, as Terry mentioned, was a dim to warm. Because in hospitality, if you have a restaurant or a bar and you're dimming it in the course of the day, in the evening, if it stays that cooler color temperature and doesn't warm up, like Terry described, like that incandescent or halogen that we're used to, it just didn't really create the right atmosphere. So although the hospitality owners, they may have wanted that LED because it lasted long, it wasn't giving them what they wanted in atmosphere. So dim to warm is doing that. The advent of tunable and mixing the LED colors in the 4, 5, or even in the 2 strip range is giving more ability to use it in healthcare, in schools, in a lot of different areas. So we're seeing, as the controls simplify and the technology cost comes down, that we're seeing more interest in a school, in a hospital, in a cancer center, to look at that tunable white.
Okay, let's take a hospital, maybe take a dementia ward. How would one light that using tunable light for circadian stimulus?
So one of the things that some of the research is showing, being done at the Lighting Research Center and Mariana Figuera's team, is that you can really impact the health and the well-being of the dementia patients, the Alzheimer's patients, as well as help the staff. So that if you're dosing the patients with a higher light level and you have a cooler, you have that pump of blue spectrum in that light early in the day, that morning time, that is helping the patients, not only reducing agitation, helping them to sleep better, to get to sleep and to stay asleep, because these patients very often were like napping in the middle of the day and then not sleeping so very well at night. So if you were stimulating them so they were staying awake more and then got a full night's sleep and there was less agitation and night wandering, helped the patients and was a huge help to the caregivers who suddenly had patients who were easier to tend to and to take care of it in their facilities.
Terry?
So Randy, it's very interesting. In the hospital environment, as Sandra said, a lot of times you have these patients 24 hours a day. And so a lot of that circadian controls and stimulation could be time of day based. You really would like the patients to wake up and be energized at the same time and then cut down your stimulus at night. What's very intriguing, and it is where the controls are, then how do you do exams? How do you do things that are very task specific? So we're probably going to be evolving some really exciting vertical control schemes within these various segments. Because a teacher is going to general mode, audio visual mode, tablet mode. You want to excite the kids, you want to calm the kids. And that may not always be tied to a time of day. So we're going to see really evolving controls making very energy efficient, super long lifetime luminaires work. And we are just on the cusp of it.
Yeah, and the user experience research that goes into these systems is really important, right? The last thing that a teacher wants is a more complicated control system in their room. They're already dealing with more complex AV systems, more complex projector systems, computer systems, and so they want the simplicity of hitting the button on the wall and going to the scene and having it just react the way that they would expect. Yet they want the features of the color tuning, the alertness, providing different experiences for the students.
So Brent, let's play that out. How would you see that happening? Would they have buttons that say stimulation or calm, or would they have certain times of the day to press a certain button? How would you keep it simple?
That's great. That's a great question. So I think it's important that we keep it simple. I think that you can use the scenes, you can align scenes to what color temperatures or color preferences should be according to those scenes. So there could be certain types of activities that want to stimulate the students, in which case they may change to a more blue light and may have some activities that are more like nap time, for example. They may hormone light. But they are going to integrate with time of day as well, because part of it is the activities that are going on in the space in the office or in the school, but part of it is still the circadian response and the circadian stimulus. So we really need to balance what's the function that's happening at the time with what the biological needs are of the users.
Now, Sandra, you mentioned agitation, and I remember an article, I believe it was October issue of LDNA. Jim Broderick wrote an article about a study that DOE had done, or someone else had done, and he was quoting the study, but it talked about a 41% drop in agitation among dementia patients. That was a small study, but I found that, just great to see such a huge number.
Randy, absolutely. And the thing is that what they're finding is what they try to do to reduce agitation in Alzheimer's dementia patients is they put them on meds. We all know that that's not, and most of us have now had exposure to family members with dementia or Alzheimer's, and that's not a panacea, and it's a difficult process to find the right medication. If we can instead be doing that with light in a way that's helping these patients, shame on us if we're not out there trying to promote that as a method in these kinds of facilities, because it's so important and it's not so hard to do.
I think.
Well, building on that, I think what we're going to see very quickly is more intelligent devices we wear that's going to help us measure time and dosage of the stimulus. Because sleep is a very complex thing, as we know it. Body temperature drives it, caffeine, your stress. Light is a very big part of it, but it's not the only part. So we're going to need to be taking a look at body temperature. We're going to be looking at dosimeters of what sort of light and spectrum we've received. And as soon as that knowledge comes together, these applications are just going to explode for us.
Yeah. And in the beginning, it's going to start where we're looking across the broader, the broader end user base, and maybe doing things as an entire building, or having to do things for the home generically across all homes. But I think in the end, we're going to be taking that information, that data, and really adapting for the individual, because in reality, we all have different circadian rhythm cycles. We all have different biological needs, and so we need to be able to adapt for that.
Is there a way to easily calculate the amount of circadian stimulus we're receiving?
there are methods that are popping up, and the circadian stimulus calculator that the Lighting Research Center has developed allows a designer to take information on the luminaire, to go to luminaire manufacturer and say, I want to know the SPD numbers for this fixture. Tell me at every wavelength what the output is. And you could plug that into this calculator, and with the light level that you're designing to, you're designing the 30-foot candles in this office space, and you look at that particular fixture at a particular CCT and color rendering index, and you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, this has got a CS of 0.3, which will stimulate. So you know that that's what you need. So, okay, so you know for this light level that I'm using, this time of day I want that. And then certain times of day, as the afternoon goes on, I want to drop that down. So does that mean I'm changing the mix? Does that of the light by tuning? Is it that I'm simply reducing the intensity? There are a lot of different ways to do it, but the calculator gives you the starting point to then look at what do I need to do at different times of the day? Because I think Brent already made a comment about energy usage. And if I'm pumping up the light level in order to get that circadian stimulus, whether it's in a school or an office or hospital, earlier in the day, that might mean that I'm using more energy in that space than I would have been before. Sure. So when I don't need that light level, I want to be dropping it down to help reduce that stimulus as we progress through the day so that I can respond to also to the energy in the space.
Yeah, and we have to remember circadian stimulus is mostly vertical light levels. So it really does require having an expert understand how do I design the lighting in my space such that I'm giving the vertical intensities that are necessary. I mean, you mentioned there's different ways that you can go from a higher stimulus to low. There's intensity, there's color. You could also change the light distribution in the space, right? So having more task-oriented lighting that's not lighting my vertical surfaces, that may also play a factor in being able to minimize that. But it does remind us we need to watch out for screens, right? It's not just about our lighting in the building. The light on our screens are very important as well.
Terry, I hear that there's a lot of talk about direct, indirect is the best type of lighting for tunable white. Is that true? Do you need the indirect as well?
Well, I think as Brent said, the vertical illumination is what's getting into your photoreceptors in your eye. So, a straight puddle of light hitting the ground doesn't really reach it. So the thing about direct, indirect lighting is you light a lot of the ceiling, the whole ceiling plane comes back, not one spot. So it's, if you're not creating glare, it's a great way to bounce that light around in the space.
Okay.
And I would say one thing, Randy, the research in this area is moving at a very, very good pace. You mentioned Jim Broderick, the U.S. Department of Energy, several years ago started a couple of research projects in classrooms, in office, in the healthcare area, and that is coming just to the forefront. I know our research will be published in Q1 of next year, but it talks about the quality of the spectrum out of each chip. It talks about when you put them into an array, do you get a good blended spectrum? Are there any holes? Are there any unexpected consequences? If you use right controls so you don't let suddenly it go to 8,000 lumens, right, they run extremely efficient. We're getting 120 lumens per watt out of luminaires with all the losses. Right. And we're expecting 30 to 40 year life. So the DOE is helping build the credibility of these, and as we get them in more and more tests and trials and hospitals who have metrics and outcomes, the opportunity that we're going to have to apply these just is going to explode.
So you mentioned unintended consequences. Let's say, for example, maybe a 911 call center, and we want to really help with alertness late at night. And so we're interjecting a little circadian stimulus, maybe at 2 a.m. or whatever time it is. We are changing, and I'm going to use the word manipulating, these employee circadian rhythms. Do we, as an industry, need to worry about litigation when we do that?
I think that broadly speaking, there is an awful lot of work going into shift work. Shift work is ergonomics, shift work is what do they eat to get your body chemical cycles right, and what do you do with the lighting. And I think as long as we are trying to get a better outcome for shift work, litigation isn't the big risk. It's teasing apart a very complex area. And so how much is energized with the blue light? Can you do it with different parts of the spectrum? Could you have intense red that creates some excitement but doesn't drive the same hormones to keep you awake at night?
Sandra, Tunable White's been out for about 3 years. Why don't we see more of it?
I think cost has been the biggest issue. I've seen several projects where even the owner desired tunable, like in a sports facility where there's so much of a focus on the win, right? So the locker room for the home team where they were looking at using tunable to really try to charge up these players before they're on the field. But it very often is value engineered out of a project because either the luminaires themselves or the controls were too expensive. Whether it be for dim to warm or whether it be for tunable, I think more tunable because dim to warm, the controls are pretty straightforward or pretty simple. So I think that having the luminaires be more competitively priced, and I think now that people are beginning to look at the 2-color chip rather than the 5 or the 7, which required the DMX control and gave you incredible results, but it was just expensive. So using the 2-color chip system, and now with controls that are simpler for the users, but also less expensive, we get more plug and play, right? That now we can see an increase in the use because a school might think this is a great idea, but they can't afford to pay twice what they would have paid for their system without that.
Sure. Brent?
Yeah, and I think the great research that's going on is helping a lot too. So, I mean, we have a lot of customers asking us, quantify this, what's the value? Where's the research behind this? I need to know in dollars and cents what this is going to provide, or I need to know in test scores what's this going to provide. And I think that work is coming. And I think that as that work comes, I think we're going to see this start to explode much, much quicker because once the data is there proving this, I think you're getting a lot more users willing to spend a little more money, not double because the control systems are going to come down in cost and the fixtures are going to come down in cost, but a little more money that's going to be able to be provided.
I think the other thing, Randy, is we get excited about the new technology and there's an expectation it'll get used right away. And Sandra said it, some of these big projects need a year and a half of hand-holding to say, what is the controls? Can we do it? And so then you install it. You may need a year or a year and a half of outcomes, especially if you're bordering on health issues or hormonal issues. So suddenly 3 years is not a big time to get the type of data you would really like. And that's why we say be prepared. As Brent said, when these studies come to fruition, and it'll be done over the next 6 to 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, the industry has to be ready because it is so exciting and it is going to change so fast that we just have to have the teams ready for it.
Okay. Terry, speak a minute about non-circadian stimulus with the beauty or the benefits of tunable white light.
Thank you. We started working with some of the leading architects and interior designers and literally letting them at 25 CCT steps look at their palette of colors, their wall coverings, the fabrics. And we had never been able to do this before. We gave them a richness of pick the color for the palette. And then the building owner suddenly said, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have a new tenant in 7 years, maybe 10 years. I don't have to scrap the lighting. I will just retune it to their new style of colors, and I have future-proofed my office building. And so we have got huge excitement, but it's a very different control system to delicately tune a retail store or an office versus a teacher who wants to hit a button and they got to be somewhere in about a millisecond. And so that's why it's hard. These vertical markets are very exciting, but you're going to find the controls will evolve for them. But yeah, we should not forget the feeling and the tunability and just the quality of the space when the spectrum plays on the finishings. Brent?
I think it's a really important. Some of the real big benefits you can get on the systems you're describing are done in the 4, 5, 7 channel systems, right? They're generally more complex, more difficult to design. So the fact that these systems are simplifying the interface to be able to do that, you're not going to get an end user going in and playing with every single channel and coming up with a color mix that works for their space. They're going to need to be able to say, I want vivid red, or I want vivid blue today, or and maybe even that mixed with circadian rhythm cycle. Maybe I want vivid blue today with a high circadian stimulus, and that kind of simplicity is really going to become important.
I agree. There are so few standards with this technology. How do lighting designers ensure they're getting the right performance?
Yeah, it's really important to. I mean, in the end, lighting designers are trying to make one space look the same. They want the downlights to look the same as the 2x4 fixtures, as the wall wash fixtures, as the decorative fixtures as well. And so you really need to start looking at the specs. You have to look at the data sheets. You need to understand what the range of all the fixtures are. You need to understand what the control protocols are. The complexity goes up exponentially if you have more than 1, 2, or 3 control protocols for all the fixtures in your space. You should probably understand what the spectrum's going to look like at each of the major color temperatures that you're going to. So not only just looking at what is the red the warm color temperature chip in the fixture and what's the cool one look like, but what does it look like when I blend them half and half and I have 4,000 Kelvin? And does that 4,000 Kelvin match the 4,000 Kelvin downlight in my space? So really looking at the metrics of the fixtures really helps.
And it's unfortunately, it's not just looking at the metrics, because what a lot of designers have found is they really need to look at samples. So what happens with this downlight, exactly as Brent was saying, what happens with this troffer or this direct indirect fixture that I have in the space, and I'm tuning each one of them. So even if I buy them all from one manufacturer, are they all using the same chips? They may or may not be. That would be the ultimate, is that knowing that they're all the same chips and I'm controlling them all the same way. That's going to be the only way that I really guarantee it. So
But hold on, can a lighting designer specify to you, we want to make sure we have the same chips, and would you accept that specification?
It would be really difficult for a manufacturer to be changing the chips per each order. What you can say is that I want this range, as Brent was describing, but does that guarantee that everybody's 3,000 is the same? And when you talk about DMX controllers, this is one of the things with the DMX is that the manufacturer of the controller needs to get the information on that particular fixture to make sure they're controlling it the same. So then you can, through the controls, help that situation. But not all these spaces are DMX. A lot of them are going to use Dolly or 0 to 10 volt. So there's a lot more, I think, on the designer to be looking at what do these fixtures really look like and what do they do. So I think there's a lot more time and effort on their part if they really want to get it correct, because then also throw in the dimming range into that too. So
Sure. I would agree, it makes the lighting designer much more valuable.
Very valuable, exactly.
Closing comments?
I think what we try to say is this is the time to get ready, Randy. We've had discussions, people think technology is right around the corner. It's always a little further out. But in this case, we know the chips. We know there's some great control things going on. We know there's some great hospitals doing work. Schools are getting into it. And I believe that when you see these studies come out, the rate of adoption, it's the best, most affordable way to future-proof your work and designs and ensure very high-performance, high-quality lighting for decades. And take the opportunity now. It's coming. Get it on the designs.
Brent?
Yeah, I think educate yourself, right? As you say, Terry, it's coming, and it's coming fast. I mean, I think watching this video is probably a great first step to educate yourself, but there's a lot of other great resources out there, DOE, RPI, read some articles, understand where this is going, and be ready for it.
I think it's a really exciting time. We all thought LEDs were an exciting time because they blew the lid off of everything, right?
Sure.
And now we are finally taking those LEDs and we found a way to use them that we never had with fluorescence and metal halide. We found how they can improve our environment with color, but how they can potentially improve our lives and the lives of people who are most vulnerable, the lives of people with dementia, the lives of people with Alzheimer's, and people recovering from long-term cancer treatments. we see that we can make an impact on people, and to me, that's the most exciting piece, that we're going to be able to help to make an impact on people's health and on their lives.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. This was
Thank
great.
you, Randy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't know.